You knew he was his.
I suspected, but I was loyal to the family.
He's not family.
Now everyone knows.
NUUs, Emily Carter, son in Boston. Local news update.
He looks so happy.
Yes, he does.
We need to talk.
Whenever you're ready.
My son looked at the billionaire across the marble lobby and whispered, "Mom, why does that man have my eyes?" I should have turned around right then. I should have taken Noah's small hand, walked back through the revolving doors of the Whitmore Grand Hotel, and let the rain hide us from every camera waiting under that crystal chandelier. But the hospital papers were folded inside my purse. His cardiologist needed a signature from both legal parents before the procedure scheduled for Monday morning. It was not a dangerous surgery, the doctor had told me. Just necessary, just something that would let my 6-year-old boy run across a playground without pressing one little palm to his chest. So I stood there in my plain navy dress, my coat damp at the shoulders, my shoes leaving faint wet marks on a floor that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. Noah leaned against my leg, his blonde hair still messy from the cab ride, his blue-gray eyes fixed on Alexander Whitmore as if some quiet part of him already knew. Alexander stood 20 feet away in a black tuxedo, polished and unreachable, with Claire Donovan's hand resting lightly on his arm. Behind them, a photographer lifted his camera. The room glittered with champagne glasses, white roses, and women wearing diamonds bright enough to make the air feel cold. It was supposed to be an engagement celebration. His engagement. Not mine. Not ours. I had not come to ruin it. I had come for a signature. That was all. Victoria Whitmore saw me first. She moved through the crowd with the smooth confidence of a woman who had never once been asked to leave any room in her life. Her silver hair was pinned perfectly. Her ivory suit looked untouched by weather, worry, or regret. Her eyes dropped to Noah, then to the folder in my hand. "Emily Carter," she said, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "I thought we made ourselves clear 6 years ago." My fingers tightened around the folder. Noah's hand slipped into mine. "I need Alexander to sign a medical consent form," I said. My voice sounded calm, calmer than I felt. "It concerns Noah." At the sound of his name, Alexander's face changed for half a second. It was so quick most people would have missed it. I did not. I had once known every expression that crossed that face. Victoria reached out and took the papers before I could stop her. She opened them under the chandelier light, reading my son's full name as though it were an accusation. Noah Carter. Date of birth. Parent's signature required. Her mouth curved, but it was not a smile. "This child," she said, turning slightly so the room could hear, "is not a Whitmore." A few conversations died at once. Someone lowered a glass. Claire gave a soft laugh that sounded polite enough to be cruel. Alexander did not move. He did not defend me. He did not defend the little boy staring at him with the same eyes. Noah's fingers trembled inside mine. "Mom," he whispered, "did I do something wrong?" That was the moment something inside me went very still. Not broken. Still. I bent down, fixed the collar of his small gray jacket, and brushed a raindrop from his cheek. Then I stood, took the folder back from Victoria's hand, and looked past her at Alexander. "No," I told my son softly. "You did nothing wrong." Victoria stepped closer. "You should leave before this becomes embarrassing." I looked around at the cameras, the guests, the chandelier, the family crest carved above the hotel's grand staircase. Then I saw the portrait hanging beyond the ballroom doors. Harold Whitmore, the old chairman, Alexander's grandfather, stared down from the wall in oil paint and gold frame. Same eyes, same shape, same quiet sadness Noah carried when he asked questions too heavy for a child. My purse vibrated once against my hip. I did not check it yet. I already knew who it had to be. There was only one person in the Whitmore family who had ever called Noah by name. I let the phone vibrate against my purse while Victoria watched me like I was something the staff had forgotten to remove. I knew the number before I saw it, because only one person connected to the Whitmore name had ever reached for us without wanting something in return. 6 years of silence had taught me the difference between concern and control. Concern came quietly. Control arrived wearing pearls, speaking loudly, and pretending. Cruelty was tradition. When Noah was born, I lived in a one-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a brick building in Queens, with a window that shook every time the elevated train passed. I worked night shifts at a pediatric clinic, came home smelling faintly of hand soap and coffee, and slept in pieces while my son breathed beside me in a second-hand crib. There were mornings when my feet hurt so badly I stood in the kitchen without moving, holding a bottle of milk under warm water while the sunrise turned the wall pale yellow. But Noah would blink up at me with those serious eyes, and the whole world would become simple again. Feed him. Hold him. Keep going. I never called Alexander after the first year. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had already said the most important thing and watched his family bury it under lawyers, threats, and polished lies. When I was pregnant, Victoria sent a private driver to my clinic with an envelope and a warning. The envelope held money. The warning held her real message. Disappear before the child becomes a problem. I handed the envelope back. My hands shook then, but my voice did not. I told the driver my baby was not a problem. He was a person. After that, doors closed quickly. The hospital where Alexander had promised I would be safe suddenly lost my paperwork. My lease renewal became complicated. Friends who loved invitations to Whitmore events stopped answering my calls. Alexander vanished behind statements from assistants and family attorneys, and every time I asked for one conversation, I was told he was unavailable. Eventually, I stopped asking. I gave Noah my last name. I bought him blue sneakers from a clearance rack. I learned how to stretch $20 across 3 dinners and a school lunch. I learned the fastest route to the emergency room and the softest way to explain to a child why some children had fathers at school pickup and he had me. Every Christmas, a package arrived at our building with no return address. Books, winter coats. Once, a wooden train set Noah loved so much he slept with one little engine under his pillow. I thought it came from a charity connected to the clinic until the year Noah turned 5, when he pulled a bookmark from a storybook and showed me the name printed in small gold letters. Harold Whitmore. My knees nearly gave out right there beside the kitchen table. On the back, in careful handwriting, were 7 words I never forgot. If they deny him, call Daniel Hayes. The first time I saw Harold Whitmore in person, he was sitting alone in the back corner of a small bookstore on Lexington Avenue, wearing a charcoal overcoat and reading a children's book about trains. Noah was 5 then, small for his age, with a backpack shaped like a rocket ship and a cough that always got worse when the weather turned cold. We had gone inside because rain was coming down so hard it bounced off the sidewalk, and I wanted him warm before the bus ride home. Noah found the train section in less than a minute. He always did. I was checking the price tag on a used picture book when I heard an old man ask, "Do you like steam engines or electric ones?" I turned quickly. Harold did not look like the portrait at the Whitmore Grand. In the portrait, he looked untouchable, a billionaire chairman carved out of money and history. In that bookstore, he looked tired. Human. His hands trembled slightly around the book, and his eyes softened the moment Noah answered. "Steam engines," Noah said. "They sound like they are breathing." Harold smiled in a way that made my chest tighten. "Your father said the same thing when he was your age." The book slipped a little in my hand. Harold looked at me then, and I saw it. Recognition, not surprise. He knew exactly who I was. He knew exactly who Noah was. I stepped between them without thinking, polite but firm, because motherhood had made me gentle in some places and steel in others. "We should go," I said. Harold did not argue. He only reached into his coat pocket and placed a business card on the small table beside him. "Miss Carter," he said quietly. I waited because I was told waiting would protect the boy. My throat went dry. Protect him from whom? His eyes moved to Noah, who had already returned to the train book, tracing the tracks with one careful finger. From the people who love the Whitmore name more than they love the truth. I should have walked out. Instead, I stood there listening to rain strike the bookstore windows while an old man confessed without saying enough. He told me he had seen Noah once outside the clinic, holding my hand, laughing at a yellow cab that splashed through a puddle. He said the shape of Noah's eyes took him back 30 years in one breath. He said he made inquiries, quiet ones, and what he found kept him awake. I asked if Alexander knew. Harold looked down at his wedding band and said, "My grandson knows what he was allowed to know." That answer hurt more than a lie. Before we left, Harold bought Noah the train book. He signed the inside cover with only one letter, H. From then on, once every December, we met him at that same bookstore for 20 minutes. Never longer. He never asked Noah to call him family. He only listened. And each year, before he left, He looked at me like a man running out of time. That memory came back to me under the chandelier, while Victoria Whitmore held my son's future in her perfectly manicured hands. The same woman who had tried to erase him before he was born now stood in front of cameras, guests, and waiters carrying silver trays, pretending she had the right to decide whether my child belonged in a room. Behind her, the ballroom doors were open. I could see the white roses, the crystal glasses, the towering cake with Alexander and Claire's initials written in gold. Everything had been arranged to look flawless. Even the cruelty felt scheduled. A young reporter near the entrance lifted her phone a little higher. Victoria noticed. Of course she did. She turned her face toward the room and softened her voice just enough to sound wounded instead of cruel. "This is a private family celebration," she said. "Miss Carter has chosen a very unfortunate moment to bring an old misunderstanding into a public place." Old misunderstanding. That was what she called my son. Noah pressed closer to my side. I felt his small fingers clutch the damp fabric of my coat, and I hated that he was old enough to understand shame even when he had done nothing to earn it. Claire stepped forward then, beautiful in a pale champagne dress, with her engagement ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. She looked at Noah the way someone might look at a stain on linen. "Poor little thing," she said softly, but loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. "Children should not be dragged into their mother's bad choices." The words landed quietly. That made them worse. I looked at Alexander. I waited for one word. Not a speech. Not an apology. Just one word that said he saw the child standing 5 feet from him. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved from Noah to me, then to his mother, then back to the floor. Silence can protect. Silence can also abandon. In that moment, his silence did both, but only one of us was protected. Victoria handed the folder back to me as if it carried something dirty. "Security will escort you out," she said. "And if you attempt to contact my son again, our attorneys will respond." A man in a black suit moved toward us from beside the coat check. Noah looked up at me. His eyes were wet, but he did not cry. That hurt more than tears. He had learned too early to be quiet in rooms where adults were unkind. I knelt in front of him and fixed the zipper of his little jacket, because my hands needed something gentle to do. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. "No, sweetheart," I said. "We are leaving before they teach you the wrong lesson about your worth." The reporter's phone was still pointed in our direction. Victoria smiled as if she had won. Claire slipped her hand through Alexander's arm. He let her. I stood and reached into my purse, my fingers closing around Harold's old business card. The edges were soft from years of being hidden behind Noah's insurance card. I had never used it. I had prayed I would never have to. Then Victoria said, "Make sure the cameras get her leaving." I looked at her one last time. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself to people who had already chosen their lie. I only pulled out my phone, touched the number printed beneath Daniel Hayes's name, and waited as it rang once, twice, 3 times. When the call connected, I turned slightly away from Noah and said the 7 words Harold had prepared. "Me for." They denied him in public today. Daniel Hayes did not ask me to repeat myself. He did not sound surprised. He only went quiet for 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds the lobby felt colder than the rain outside. I could hear cameras clicking behind me. I could hear Claire laughing softly with someone near the ballroom doors, trying to make the moment feel small. I could hear Noah breathing through his nose the way he did when he was trying not to cry. Then Daniel said, "Are members of the press still present?" I looked toward the young reporter with the phone in her hand. Another man near the staircase had a camera hanging from his neck. Victoria had wanted witnesses. She had made sure of it. "Yes," I said. "Good," Daniel replied, and the word made my fingers tighten around the phone. "Do not argue with them. Do not sign anything. Do not accept money. Leave the building with your son, and answer only my calls from this point forward." My heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What is happening?" I asked. Daniel lowered his voice. "Mr. Harold Whitmore prepared a final clause for this exact situation. If Noah was ever publicly denied by the family, certain protections would activate immediately." I looked at Alexander. He was still standing beside Claire, but now he was watching me instead of the floor. Maybe he heard Harold's name. Maybe guilt had finally found a crack in the walls his family built around him. Victoria noticed the change in his face and stepped in front of him like she could block memory itself. "Miss Carter," she said, sharp enough to cut through the lobby noise, "this performance is over." I kept the phone to my ear. Daniel, they are asking security to remove us. His voice became firmer. Then let them escort you. Calmly. Every second of this helps your son. That sentence steadied me more than any promise could have. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket without ending the call, then bent down and picked up Noah's little blue mitten from the marble floor. It had fallen during all the staring, all the whispering, all the pretending that a child could be erased because rich people found him inconvenient. I brushed the dust from it and put it back on his hand. We are going home, I told him. He nodded, but his eyes stayed on Alexander. Is he mad at me? He whispered. I swallowed the ache before it became tears. No, sweetheart. He is confused. It was kinder than the truth. Victoria folded her arms. You should be ashamed for bringing him here. I looked at her then, really looked at her, at the pearls around her neck, at the calm satisfaction in her eyes, at the woman who had spent 6 years believing my silence was fear. No, I said softly. You should remember this moment. Her smile faded. I took Noah's hand and walked toward the revolving doors. No screaming, no begging, no explanation. Behind me, Alexander called my name once, but not loudly enough to matter. The rain hit the glass in silver lines, and just before the doors carried us outside, Daniel's voice came through my coat pocket, low and certain. Emily, Harold's clause is active. Now the truth has witnesses. The rain soaked through my coat before I reached the curb, but I kept one hand around Noah's and the other pressed against my pocket where Daniel Hayes was still on the line. The city sounded normal around us. Tires hissed through puddles. A taxi horn complained at the corner. People hurried beneath umbrellas, carrying shopping bags and dinner plans, while my son stood beside me under the hotel awning, trying to understand why a room full of strangers had just decided he was something to be ashamed of. I lifted my hand for a cab, but Daniel told me not to go home yet. Take him somewhere public and quiet, he said. A diner, a coffee shop, anywhere with cameras and people. I am sending a car, but I do not want you alone until we know how Victoria responds. I looked back through the glass doors. Victoria was still inside, speaking to a security manager. Claire stood near the ballroom entrance, pretending to study her ring. Alexander was not beside her anymore. He stood by the staircase beneath Harold's portrait, staring at me through the rain-streaked glass, as if he had finally remembered that silence could not erase a face. Noah followed my gaze. Does he know me? He asked. The question landed so gently it almost broke me. I crouched in front of him and pulled his hood over his hair. Not the way he should, I said. But that is not your fault. We walked 1 block to a small diner with red booths and fogged windows. I ordered Noah hot chocolate with whipped cream, even though it was almost dinner, because some days a child deserved sweetness before answers. He wrapped both hands around the mug and watched the door every time it opened. I kept my phone on the table. 30 minutes later, Daniel called again. His voice was calm, but something underneath it had changed. The video is already circulating, he said. Someone from the event posted it. The board has seen it. Harold's trustees have seen it. Victoria will try to control the story before morning. I closed my eyes. I could still hear her voice saying this child. Not his name. Never his name. What does the clause do? I asked. Daniel paused. It freezes certain voting rights tied to the Whitmore family trust until legal identity and conduct provisions are reviewed. It also requires an emergency family meeting if a potential biological heir is publicly denied. The words sounded too large for the little diner table between Noah's crayons and my wet gloves. Potential biological heir, I repeated softly. Noah looked up from drawing a train. Daniel's voice lowered. Emily, Harold did more than leave instructions. He left evidence. Across town, I did not know it then, but Alexander had returned to Harold's private study at the Whitmore estate. Later, he told me the room smelled like old leather, cedar, and medicine. He found the envelope in the locked center drawer because the key was taped beneath a framed photograph of him as a boy. Inside were 3 pictures. One of Alexander at 6 years old, one of Noah outside the bookstore holding a trained book, and one of them placed side by side, with Harold's handwriting across the bottom. Same eyes, same blood. Stop letting your mother choose what you are brave enough to know. By the time Noah fell asleep that night, the rain had stopped, but the sound of it stayed inside me. He curled on the couch under his dinosaur blanket because he did not want to sleep in his room, and I sat beside him with my shoes still on, listening to the radiator click and the city settle beyond our third-floor window. Daniel had sent a driver to bring us home from the diner, then arranged for a legal aid to wait downstairs until morning. I wanted to feel relieved. Instead, I felt the strange calm that comes when you know a storm has only changed direction. At 7:12 the next morning, someone knocked on my apartment door. Not the gentle knock of a neighbor. Not the quick tap of a delivery. 3 slow sounds, each one certain it had the right to enter. I looked through the peephole and saw Victoria Whitmore standing in the hallway, dressed in a camel coat that probably cost more than my car, holding a leather handbag in both hands. Behind her stood a man with a tablet and a sealed envelope. I opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. "My son is sleeping," I said. Her eyes moved past me to the small living room, the folded laundry on the chair, the school art taped to the refrigerator, the train books stacked neatly beside Noah's sneakers. She looked at our life the way she had looked at us in the hotel, like something beneath her, but inconveniently real. "Then we will keep this brief," she said. I did not invite her in. She noticed. Her mouth tightened. "You embarrassed my family last night." I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because some people can stand in the ashes they caused and still complain about the smoke. "No," I said. "You embarrassed a child." The man beside her shifted. Victoria lifted one hand, and he passed her the envelope. She held it out through the narrow opening. "This is a generous offer. Enough to relocate comfortably, cover medical expenses, and stop this before it becomes uglier than necessary." I looked at the envelope, then at her. "You brought money to my door before breakfast." I brought a solution. "No," I said quietly. "You brought the same insult in a nicer envelope." Her face hardened. "Be careful, Miss Carter. People like you mistake attention for power." Behind me, Noah stirred on the couch. I stepped into the hallway and pulled the door nearly closed, keeping my body between her voice and my son. "People like me learn the difference between fear and patience," I said. "I was patient for 6 years." Victoria leaned closer. Her perfume was clean and cold, like expensive soap in an empty guest bathroom. "Alexander will never choose you." There it was. The mistake she kept making. She thought this was about being chosen. She thought I had carried 6 years of silence because I wanted a ring, a mansion, a place at her table. I looked down at the envelope and saw my reflection in its gold clasp, tired but steady. "This was never about Alexander choosing me," I said. "It was about all of you refusing to see my son." I pushed the envelope back through the gap. She did not take it at first, so it hung there between us, a price tag on a truth she could not afford. Finally, her fingers closed around it. As she turned to leave, a tiny gray hair slipped from her coat and landed on the floor near my door. Noah opened it before I could stop him, rubbing one eye with his fist. He looked at Victoria, then at the hair, then up at me. "Mom," he whispered, "is she my grandma?" Victoria froze in the hallway. For the first time since I had known her, she had no sentence ready. Victoria looked at Noah as if his question had reached a place in her that money had never taught her how to protect. For 1 second, the hallway was silent enough for me to hear the elevator doors open at the far end. Then her face closed again. The old coldness returned, polished and practiced. "No," she said. "I am not." Noah stepped behind my leg, and that small movement told me everything I needed to know. Children understand rejection before they understand reasons. I placed one hand on his shoulder and kept my eyes on Victoria. "You should leave now." She looked at me like she wanted to say something final, something sharp enough to put us back where she believed we belonged. But her phone rang before she could speak. She checked the screen, and the color left her face so quickly that even the man beside her noticed. She answered with one word. "Daniel." I could not hear his voice, only the change in hers. Her posture stiffened. Her mouth parted. Then she looked at Noah again, not with softness, but with fear. After she left, the hallway still smelled faintly of her perfume. I closed the door, locked it, and leaned my forehead against the wood for one breath. Noah tugged at my sleeve. Was I bad? I turned and knelt so fast my knees hit the old floorboards. "No, sweetheart. Never." He looked toward the door. "Then why does she not like me?" I wanted to tell him that some adults were afraid of truth when it came in small sneakers and sleepy eyes. I wanted to tell him that cruelty often dressed itself as pride. But he was 6, so I brushed his hair back and said, "Because she does not know how lucky she would be to love you." Less than an hour later, Daniel called. Harold Whitmore had been moved to a private hospital suite on the Upper East Side, and he was asking for Noah. I almost said no. Every part of me wanted to keep my son inside our apartment, surrounded by crayons, cereal bowls, and the soft safety of ordinary things. But Harold had never denied him. Harold had waited, watched, and prepared something when I did not even know we needed protection. So I packed Noah's blue sweater, his medication, and the train book Harold had signed with the letter H. The hospital room was quiet when we arrived. No chandeliers, no cameras, just pale curtains, a soft beeping monitor, and an old man lying beneath a white blanket with his hands folded over his chest. Harold looked smaller than I remembered, but when Noah walked in, his eyes opened with a clarity that made Daniel step back. "My boy," Harold whispered. Noah looked at me first, asking permission without words. I nodded. He walked to the bed and placed the train book beside Harold's hand. The old man touched the cover like it was something sacred. "I am sorry," Harold said, not to Noah first, but to me. "I thought time would make them decent. I was wrong." His voice trembled, but every word carried weight. He told me he had ordered a private legal DNA test after the second bookstore meeting, using a sample from Alexander's archived medical records and the cup Noah had left behind after drinking apple juice. He had not used it to take Noah from me. He had used it to protect him. Daniel opened a black leather folder at the foot of the bed. Inside were documents with seals, signatures, and dates that went back years. Harold reached toward the bedside table, where a small velvet box waited. I opened it with careful fingers. Inside was a Whitmore signet ring, old gold, heavy with history. "This is not a gift," Harold whispered. "It is proof that he was never outside this family. They only locked the door." Then he nodded to Daniel, and Daniel placed a silver flash drive in my palm. "My final statement," Harold said. "Play it when they all believe they are still in control." Harold died 2 days later, just before sunrise, while the city outside his hospital window was still gray and quiet. Daniel called me at 6:14 in the morning. I was standing in my kitchen packing Noah's lunch, cutting the crust from a peanut butter sandwich because he said crusts made bread taste serious. When I saw Daniel's name on the screen, I already knew. Some calls carry the answer before a word is spoken. Noah was still asleep, one arm wrapped around his stuffed dog, the train book open beside him. I did not wake him right away. I sat at the kitchen table with Harold's velvet box in front of me and let myself cry silently for the old man who had entered my son's life like a secret apology. By noon, the formal notice arrived. The emergency reading of Harold Whitmore's final will and trust provisions would take place the next afternoon at the Whitmore estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. All direct family members, trustees, legal counsel, and certain members of the Whitmore Holdings Board were required to attend. Daniel told me Victoria had tried to move the meeting to a private conference room controlled by her attorneys. Harold's instructions did not allow it. He had chosen the estate. He had chosen witnesses. He had chosen the room where every family portrait watched from the walls. I dressed Noah in his navy sweater and khaki pants because he asked if Mr. Harold would want him to look nice. I wore a simple black dress, the same one I wore to job interviews and parent-teacher conferences, and placed the flash drive inside my purse next to Noah's medication. The Whitmore estate sat behind iron gates and a driveway long enough to make a poor woman feel the distance before she reached the door. Stone columns rose above us. White shutters framed tall windows. The lawn looked clipped with a ruler. Noah pressed his face to the car window and whispered, "Does anyone live in all of that?" I squeezed his hand. People can live in big houses and still have small hearts. The front door opened before we reached it. A housekeeper looked at Noah, then at me, and gave a small, respectful nod. That kindness almost undid me. Inside, the foyer smelled of lemon polish, lilies, and old money. Voices came from the library. Victoria's voice first. Controlled. Annoyed. Then Alexander's, lower and strained. When we entered, every conversation stopped. Victoria sat near the fireplace in a black dress with pearls at her throat. Claire stood behind her, pale and perfect, though her engagement ring was missing from her finger. Alexander was by the window, his face sleepless, his eyes fixed on Noah before they found me. Around the long mahogany table sat trustees, board members, and attorneys in dark suits. They had expected me to look nervous, maybe even grateful to be allowed in. I felt Noah's hand tighten around mine. and all my fear became useful. Daniel stood at the head of the table with a black leather folder in front of him. When Victoria gestured toward 2 chairs near the wall, Daniel did not move his eyes from his papers. "No," he said clearly. "Mrs. Carter and her son will sit at the head table." The room went still. Victoria's chin lifted. "That is family seating." Daniel looked up then, calm as a locked door. "Exactly," he said. Daniel's single word moved through the library like a match struck in a dark room. "Exactly." I felt every eye turn toward Noah. He did not understand the weight of that word, only that grown people had suddenly become very quiet. I guided him to the chair beside mine at the head table, and he climbed into it carefully, placing both hands in his lap the way I had taught him to do at school meetings. Across from us, Victoria's face had gone, smooth and colorless. Alexander stood by the window without blinking. Daniel opened the black leather folder. The soft sound of paper turning seemed louder than the storm beginning outside. "We are here to read the final will and trust amendments of Harold James Whitmore," Daniel said. "Before we begin the distribution provisions, Mr. Whitmore required that one matter of biological identity and family conduct be addressed on record." Victoria sat forward. "This is highly inappropriate." Daniel did not look at her. "It is required." He passed sealed copies to each attorney, trustee, and board representative. Then he placed one copy in front of me. I saw the official laboratory seal before I saw the names. My fingers stayed still on the table. I had waited 6 years for truth to enter a room without trembling. Daniel read clearly. "The genetic analysis confirms, with legal certainty, that Noah Carter is the biological child of Alexander Whitmore." A glass touched the table too hard somewhere to my left. Claire covered her mouth. Alexander closed his eyes like the sentence had struck something awake inside him. Noah looked from Daniel to me. "Mom," he whispered. I took his hand under the table. "You are safe," I said. "Just listen." Daniel continued. "The analysis also confirms Noah Carter as the biological great-grandchild of Harold James Whitmore." Victoria stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "Those tests were obtained without my consent." Daniel looked at her then. "Your consent was not required. Nor does your objection alter the result." The room held its breath. He turned to the next page. "Under the amended trust provisions, Harold Whitmore transfers a protected share of Whitmore family trust assets and a non-voting equity interest in Whitmore Holdings into the Noah Carter Trust, to be managed solely for Noah's benefit until he reaches the age of 25. Until that time, Emily Carter shall serve as primary guardian trustee." My heart stopped for one silent beat. I had known Harold planned protection. I had not known he had built a future. Victoria's voice sharpened. "She has no qualifications to manage Whitmore assets." Daniel's reply was quiet. Mr. Whitmore disagreed. He wrote that Miss Carter demonstrated more loyalty, restraint, and moral judgment than the adults who denied her child. Alexander finally moved. He came one step closer to the table, his face pale. "Daniel," he said, "did my grandfather know all this time?" Daniel lifted the silver flash drive from beside the folder and connected it to the small screen near the bookcase. Harold's face appeared, thinner than before, but his eyes were steady. His voice filled the room, weak but unmistakable. "If you are hearing this, then the family has done what I feared. Victoria, you chose reputation over blood. Alexander, you chose silence over courage. And Emily, you chose dignity when we gave you every reason to hate us." Noah's hand tightened around mine. I could not look away. Harold continued. "Noah was never outside this family. He was placed outside by pride. Any member who publicly denies him, humiliates him, or attempts to purchase his disappearance shall be removed from discretionary control of the family trust." Victoria lowered herself back into the chair as if the floor had shifted beneath her. Daniel turned off the screen. No one spoke. The rain tapped against the tall windows, soft and steady. Then Daniel read the final line Harold had left for them all. "The name Whitmore belongs not to those who protect appearances, but to those willing to protect the truth." The silence after Harold's final line was not empty. It was full of everything the room could no longer pretend not to know. Victoria sat with one hand on the arm of her chair, her pearls rising and falling against her throat as she breathed. Claire looked at Alexander as if his name had become less useful to her in the span of 10 minutes. The trustees avoided Victoria's eyes. The board members read the pages again, slowly this time, searching for a loophole that Harold had not left behind. Noah leaned against my side. His small shoulder touched my arm, warm and real, while all that old money finally discovered it had limits. Alexander walked toward us, but he stopped before he reached the table. Maybe Daniel's presence stopped him. Maybe guilt did. His eyes were red, not from tears yet, but from the terrible effort of holding them back in a room where everyone had already seen too much. "Emily," he said. My name sounded different in his mouth now. Smaller, less certain. I did not know. I looked at him, and for the first time in 6 years, I did not feel the need to prove anything. The papers were there. The test was there. Harold's voice had been there. The truth had finally stood up without asking me to carry it alone. "You did not ask," I said. He flinched, not because I had raised my voice, but because I had not. Victoria turned toward him sharply. "Alexander, do not make this worse." He looked at his mother then, really looked at her, as if he was seeing not the woman who raised him, but the woman who had taught him which silences were acceptable. "Worse," he said. "There is a child sitting here who asked me last night why I had his eyes." Noah looked down at his hands. I felt his fingers find mine under the table. Alexander saw it. Whatever apology he had prepared fell apart on his face. He stepped closer and lowered himself slightly. Not too close, not touching, finally careful. "Noah," he said, "I am sorry." Noah did not answer. He moved closer to me, and that small movement did what no lawyer could have done. It showed the cost. Alexander's shoulders dropped. Claire removed herself from the back of Victoria's chair and placed her engagement ring on the polished table. The sound was soft, but everyone heard it. "I did not agree to this kind of scandal," she said. No one stopped her when she walked out. Victoria looked after her, then at the ring, then at the folder that had taken away more than a future wedding. Daniel adjusted his glasses. Under Harold Whitmore's provisions, Victoria Whitmore is immediately suspended from discretionary control of the family trust pending review by the independent trustees. Victoria's face hardened, but her voice shook. "You cannot do this." Daniel closed the folder. Harold already did. For the first time, she looked at me without superiority. Not with kindness. Not with remorse. With need. "Emily," she said, forcing my name through her teeth like it cost her something. "We can discuss what is best for the child." I stood slowly, keeping Noah beside me. "You had 6 years to care about what was best for him." Her lips parted, but no answer came. Alexander whispered my name again. I turned to him before he could ask for what he had not earned. "Do not apologize because the room heard the truth," I said. "Apologize because you were quiet when a little boy needed one adult to be brave." Outside, the rain had stopped, but no light came through the windows yet. I did not leave the Whitmore estate with their apology in my hands. Apologies were easy after evidence. They were cheap after consequences. What I needed was protection for my son, written in ink no one in that room could soften with charm or erase with family pressure. Daniel understood before I said it. He placed a clean legal pad in front of me and uncapped his pen. "Tell me what you want for Noah," he said. Victoria shifted in her chair, offended by the idea that I had been given the first voice. Alexander stayed standing near the window, looking at Noah as though every second of his childhood had become a door closing in his face. I looked at my son. He had taken the little train book from my purse and was running one finger over the letter Harold had written inside the cover. He did not know about trusts, voting rights, or public scandals. He knew only that adults had argued over whether he belonged. That was enough damage for one day. "Full physical custody remains with me," I said. My voice was calm. "Any visitation with Alexander must begin slowly, with a child therapist involved, and only if Noah is comfortable." Alexander nodded immediately. That almost hurt. 6 years too late. Obedience looked like regret. Daniel wrote it down. "No media contact," I continued. "No interviews using Noah's name. No photographs released. No family statement that turns him into a public relations repair project." One of the board members looked up. "The company will need to address the video." I turned to him. "Then address the adults who made it necessary, not the child they humiliated." He looked back down. Daniel kept writing. Victoria's fingers tightened around the pearls at her throat. "You are making demands as if you understand what is at stake." I looked at her for a long moment. "I understand exactly what is at stake. A 6-year-old boy's peace. That matters more than your reputation." Her face flushed, but she said nothing. I asked for an independent trustee to manage Noah's assets with Daniel until he turned 25. I asked for medical costs to be covered through the trust without requiring me to request approval from anyone named Whitmore. I asked for written confirmation that no one could remove Noah from my care, challenge my guardianship, or use money to pressure me into silence. With every sentence, the room changed. Not loudly, quietly, the way a locked door changes when the right key finally turns. Alexander stepped closer when Daniel finished reading the terms back. "Emily," he said, "I want to help." I believed him. That was the painful part. I believed that somewhere beneath the fear, the privilege, and the years of cowardice, he meant it. But meaning something after the truth arrived was not the same as standing beside us before it did. "Then help by not rushing him," I said. "Do not ask Noah to carry your guilt. Do not ask me to make you feel forgiven so you can sleep tonight." His eyes lowered. "I understand." Victoria gave a bitter laugh, small and brittle. "After all of this, you still will not punish us." I gathered Noah's book, his medication, and Harold's velvet box. Then I stood. Living with the truth is enough. Noah slipped his hand into mine. At the door, he looked back once at the long table, the portraits, the people who had finally learned his name. He did not wave. He only held tighter to me, and together we walked out before anyone could mistake our peace for permission. 1 year later, Noah ran across the playground in Central Park without stopping to press his hand to his chest. The first time he did it, I stood by the bench with his water bottle in my hand and cried behind my sunglasses like a woman who had finally reached the other side of fear. His procedure had gone smoothly. His cheeks had color again. His laugh came louder now, free and bright, rising over the sound of bicycles, dogs, and children, calling to one another under the spring trees. He still loved trains. He still kept Harold's book on the shelf beside his bed. But he no longer asked why some people had not wanted him. Children heal in small ways adults sometimes miss. A good morning without a hard question. A drawing taped to the refrigerator with all the people who stayed. A birthday candle blown out without looking toward the door. Alexander came to the park every other Saturday, always early, always careful. He brought no cameras, no expensive gifts, no promises too large for a 6-year-old heart. Sometimes Noah ran to him. Sometimes he stayed beside me for 10 minutes before walking over. Alexander accepted both. That was the first decent thing he learned to do. He stopped asking me how long forgiveness would take. He stopped calling his regret love. He learned to sit on a bench with a juice box and listen while Noah explained subway maps, dinosaurs, and why steam engines sounded alive. Victoria did not come. Not at first. The trust review had removed her from every position Harold's clause allowed, and the family statement Daniel released mentioned only the truth, the child's privacy, and the adult failure that made legal protection necessary. Her name appeared in newspapers for 3 days, then faded, the way powerful people fear most. Quietly, without control. Months later, she sent Noah a card for his birthday. No money, no family crest, just a plain blue card with his name written carefully on the envelope. I did not hide it from him. I also did not make him open it. I placed it on the kitchen table and said, "You get to choose." He looked at it for a long time, then slid it into the drawer beside his crayons. "Maybe later," he said. That was enough. As for me, I stayed in Queens. Not because I had to, but because peace had never depended on stone gates or long driveways. With Daniel's help, I started a small legal support fund for mothers who had been threatened, dismissed, or bought into silence by families with more money than mercy. Some nights, after Noah fell asleep, I answered emails from women who wrote the same sentence in different ways. They said no one would believe them. I always wrote back the same truth. Evidence matters. Patience matters. Your child matters more than their reputation. On the anniversary of Harold's Will Reading, I took Noah back to the little bookstore on Lexington Avenue. Rain tapped softly against the windows, just like the first day we met him there. Noah chose a new train book and carried it to the counter with both hands. Outside, he looked up at me and asked, "Are we Whitmores?" I thought of the hotel lobby, the chandelier, Victoria's voice, Alexander's silence, Harold's trembling hand closing around the truth before it disappeared. Then I knelt in front of my son and zipped his jacket against the cold. "You are Noah Carter," I said. "That has always been enough." He smiled, satisfied in the simple way only a child can be, and slipped his warm hand into mine. We walked home through the rain without hiding from it. They thought my child needed their name to matter. But the truth was simpler than that. He was never less because they rejected him. They became less the moment they did.